Hello, panicked Googler. Don't worry, you're probably watching this video already because you're having a hard time getting a fuel fitting off of your Audi fuel filter, in which case there's still hope for you, so don't worry. Or you've mangled the fitting already and you're in a tricky situation and you're wondering how bad it is, but I have the answers for you regardless, so come along. Also, hello, my name is Steve. Welcome to Figure It Audi. Welcome to the channel if this is the first time you're tuning in. You can find me on Instagram at Figure It Audi. Check out the join button below all the videos to learn more about the Four Rings Club. And unlike my usual videos where I do careful planning and bring you through a whole process front to back, today you're actually joining me at the halfway point because I've run into this problem myself and I've already found a solution and I want to share it with you. So let's go and see where I'm at. And yes, it's true. Today we're going to be looking at the B6, B7 platform chassis S4, but this is going to be widely applicable to your Audis, Volkswagens, Seats, everything in that family, and honestly, beyond that as well. First up, if you're laying under the car looking at your phone right now and you just want the answer to how to get the fitting off, let's do that right now. I'll show you on the bench the two types of fittings that you'll find in the fuel system in an Audi. Here's fitting style number one. It's actually the easier one to deal with, but it's sort of the most discreet way to release it because there's a little metal tab that's going to be on the rounded side of the fitting. So see how the top is a bit flat, bottom is round. On that bottom third or so, that's where you're going to have a little metal tab that you simply press in. You can do this usually with your hand, or you can use the flat side of a flat edge screwdriver to just depress it. And in true Audi fashion, it's usually a push in towards the connection, depress, pull out. On the inside of the fitting, and I understand this is a little hard to see in the light, but when you push it down, all it's doing is actually just lining up the outer part of the fitting with the inner part of the hose, because when it's released, it actually creates a bit of an offset, and that's what hooks it onto the fuel filter. So let's go ahead and do a practical example of that. Just for the record, these are 5/16 size fuel line fittings. That's pretty common for a fuel filter. Sometimes they get a little larger. Just wanted to call it out. So here is our clip style, engaged. And you can typically do this by hand, but honestly, most of the time under the car, you're a little tight on space. Here's my flat edge of the screwdriver. I'm going to depress, pull to the edge where I can feel the little lip, and I'm off. Here's style number two. This is the trickier one because the tabs on the side make it look like you want to depress them, either squeeze them at the back or at the front with a tool, and you're thinking that that would open up something towards the edge to let you pull it off. No, unfortunately, that's not true. The design is not amazing, to be honest. It's just a slider. So quite truly, all you're doing is taking the two tabs here and you're pulling it back inside of its own body. See this little bit of movement right here? Those maybe 3-4 millimeters, that's all you're doing. Because on the inside, there is a conical shaped claw and the wide end is at the front, skinny at the back, and you're essentially just like pulling this back to create a flare where the wide end is so that you can pop it over the lip on your fuel line. Here's a look of it on the inside when I do the same movement. A little bit of shifting, that's all that's happening. One more time, let's do a practical example. Once again, I'll add the fitting first. There we go. I actually find that putting a little bit of WD-40 in here to start with actually gets the plastic moving against itself a little bit better. Good of a little insurance policy there. Either way, it should be as simple as grab the two little tabs, push in, pull back, keep pulling back as you get to the lip, and it should slide off. I know it doesn't feel that easy under the car, but that's as simple as it is. Now, since you can see my fuel line sitting on the bench, you know things went pretty sideways for me. I didn't do this just for fun to make a video for you. What happened for me is the central fitting that's actually the return line on most of the filters like this. It's the pull style fitting, and I previously damaged it in a different fuel filter change, and this time it was just too damaged to actually get off once again. So I shouldn't have even let it got that far. I should have repaired it last time. But here we are, and what I ended up needing to do was actually remove the entire return line that goes to the driver's side, so actually above the fuel tank, with everything still attached to it. Later in the video, I'll address the repair of an existing fuel line like this one versus replacing one entirely, which is what I will be doing myself. But I just wanted to tell you this because if you're in the situation where your fuel fitting is messed up, it is not impossible to simply remove it from these black stock nylon fuel lines. All you really need to do is use heat. I used my Milwaukee heat gun right here. I didn't have to use a heck of a lot of heat. I've got it set to the 175 degrees Celsius one. I did bump it up to the next one in the middle there, but it ended up singeing the line. So you know that is going to be too hot for you, not necessary. And I was able to pull off that fitting quite easily. Now, before we talk about line repair and replacement, let's talk about how I even got the line on my bench in the first place, because you would be scared off by maybe forum searches and what the manual says or what Audi might say. because I have the worst case scenario, keep in mind, right here. I had to get the longest line that goes over top of the gas tank to the other side of the car to get it out. Whereas your other lines are sort of just snaking up the passenger side, depending on what fuel filter you have, either the 3 or 4 port, 2 or 3 of those possible 4 lines will actually just be going up maybe a foot or 2 right above it. And you would be led to believe online that potentially you need to drop like your drive shaft and your exhaust and your subframe and the entire gas tank. Absolutely not true. You do need to remove a couple of things that I'll show you in a second here to get some room, but really you're just trying to get maybe an inch or 2 of play on the top of the gas tanks to push them down a little bit while you snake the hoses out. Bit of an important disclaimer here. Basically, I had no gas in my car. I was running on fumes when I started to do this job, which is actually quite helpful because when you lower the gas tank, obviously you're gonna have to put it back up later too. And with all that weight of the fuel in there, could be a little bit tricky. I know you can't control these things. If you came into this job thinking you were just replacing a fuel filter and now you're looking at what I'm talking about, I get it. You didn't think that was going to happen on a Saturday afternoon. So if you're able to pump out some fuel, if you absolutely need to, maybe think about that. If you're doing this as a planned repair after the fact, wait till your gas is really low. We of course are now under the car and I'll show you what you need to remove. 7 bolts, that's it. I'm going to list off the things that I removed though, because you'll see them missing that you do not need to remove. So I took off the back half of my exhaust system because it's aftermarket and it was really easy for me to do that. And I was just investigating and learning what to do, but you don't need to do that at all. You also do not need to remove the heat shielding around the drive shaft, which is what I did because it's already connected to the gas tank as one solid piece. So there'd be no point in removing it. Those are the pieces that would normally be right up here by this stud and this stud here. You can just leave them. They're usually wrapped around right here. You will also see that I loosened up my parking brake cables. Usually it's connected by 2 bolts right here and then clipped into the gas tank right here. You also do not need to do that. Just so you're clear on orientation, the front of the car is at the top of your screen. Now I just want to call out this metal plate right here. It is attached to the gas tank. It's made to protect it from the drive shaft and heat from the exhaust. That's important because there's a few things that you might think you want to take off, but it's actually a bit of a securing mechanism, which is why the 4 bolt holes at the top are all things that need to be removed. So these ones over here are of course the gas tank straps that you'll need to remove those, but the ones on the inside is actually connected to a little plate that holds the parking brake cables too. You need to remove both of those ones as well. The other 3 bolts are towards the rear of the car. Obviously you have the back end of each gas tank strap as well. And then the easiest way to locate the last one is go straight up from the rear differential carrier mount. There's actually another bolt right up in here. And we're really not going for a whole lot of flexibility here. When you're done, you're only gonna get maybe an inch of sag, and then you can kind of wiggle it like so. That's all we're going for. And the entire purpose of doing that was so that you can go into your back seat. Obviously you need to remove the rear bench. You can do that just by slipping in your hand here and pulling up. There's only 2 grommets that hold it into place. Take off the lid cover, no big deal there. Because now you can actually get some play in the gas tank. You can push down from above. Like that. Helps give you a little extra room because ultimately you're trying to slip in your hand and more than likely you'll be working to get hoses down from this direction. I was going all the way across. If you did bung up that middle fitting that goes to the return line, yes, it does come all the way over into this port right here. Now what's kind of tricky is that the gas tank itself has little grooves in it right about here and right about here. Little indentations that the fuel lines are meant to clip into, so to say. They're not really stuck in there. There isn't a clip you need to release. You just need to pop them out. So really your first effort, if you're in my position, is that you have to take the fuel lines and kind of like pull them up. You'll hear them disengage. It'll be a bit of a pop and you'll know that it's free because you can wiggle it around and get some movement heading that way. Otherwise, if you're working on this side of the car, the lines don't have those little grooves in the tank that they're connected to. There's actually just a little piece of tape that wraps around the fuel tank itself, sort of in this area. So if you're trying to relieve the vent line that comes into here or the line that sends fuel out of the pump and down into the filter, just know that you're gonna have to loosen up that tape to pull those lines out. Otherwise, it's a joke. It's a straight shot right out the bottom. You just loosen them up on top and then pull them out right here. So I think you can tell now that it is very much doable at home, provided you have some good working space underneath the car, a little bit of time, a little bit of patience. You will get those fuel lines out, I promise. So now it comes to the point where you have to decide how you're going to fix that fitting. So truthfully, I didn't even bother trying to find an OE replacement from Audi or VW because I don't want them. I think that pull-back style fitting sucks. Terrible design, it's going to prone to break again. Don't want them. There's 4 of them in total on the lines in the back of the car there, and I intend to replace them with something much better. Now, ideally, I wanted to put the push style fitting that I showed you first in this video on there, but unfortunately, I couldn't find one that was to my standards in terms of quality, but also in stock. So I have this from Napa Auto Parts. This is in Canada. You can find them in the States just as easily. I'll tell you all the specifics about it, but you just have to not have an allegiance to VW or Audi here because this is actually from Chrysler or GM. All that's truly important is that this meets all of my specifications. So it is a 90-degree fitting, which is what I need. There are some straight connectors under the cart though too, and those will have a different product number. I'll put both options into the description of this video to make your life easy, but just make sure because they come 2 to a pack, so you might have to get 2 different packs. The second useful part is that these are barbed on the end of it, which is important because I'm going to be going into basically a flexible fuel line, and I need to be able to secure it really well in there. But also, the fitting that you just took out of that hard nylon OE line in your car was also barbed, which means the formations in the end of your fuel line are already kind of like bumpy, and they're going to form well over something that also has barbs on it. Last, the size is pretty much right. There's an asterisk on this that I'll explain in a second, but by and large, a 5/16 fitting is going to fit a 5/16 fuel line. That's as simple as it is. Now the catch here is that it requires a little bit extra depth compared to the OE Audi connector on it. It requires about 13 millimeters of space after the little bump in the hard line. Let me show you what I mean. I'm talking about the space right here, the space in between the filter housing itself and after this little bump. And that is because these GM clip style fittings are predicated entirely on this extra little clip being able to slip over here and secure behind it so that the rest of the fitting has something to secure onto. So in this particular case, this would not work for me. I've flipped that same fuel filter around now, and you'll notice that this is deeper right here and that we do have a successful connection. So in practice, this is how it's mounted, just like so. Now we're looking at a very different type of fitting on my new fuel filter. There's obviously much more depth on it, but I'll show you another practical example of it going on and off. Here it is fully loaded, and this pinch style fitting is removed by pinching the back and pulling that off. It leaves this portion of the clip, and you can obviously just put the fitting straight back on later. Otherwise, you can remove the clip itself too just by lifting the prongs. I'm just doing so carefully with a pick so I don't break anything. So no, I don't want to confuse anyone and say that this exact fitting is a universal solution for your Audi or VW, because that's not necessarily true. I just proved that that's not the case. But my point is, you're not in dire straits if you ruin one of your fuel lines or fittings, because they can be taken apart. You can find some kind of fitting that's going to work for the receiving end of the line that you're working on. You can find a solution through this. You don't need to rebuy an entire OE part just for a fitting. Let's move on to the very last step, which is just repairing the fuel line itself. The number one and most understandable option, I truly get it, time and money, why are you going to remake all this line if you don't have to, is to just take this new fitting and put it back in your line. This is the importance of the barbed part of the new connection of the fitting that you're going to be putting in, I was talking about earlier, because even with heat, as you warm up this line to slip this in here properly, it's really not going to reform that much around the new barbs. So you really may as well find something that has essentially the same pattern. So you know the existing formation is going to close around it tightly. I would still probably recommend you clamp this down with something just to be absolute sure. And you know what, when it comes to pressure, yeah, it should hold. That's the question mark in my mind. These nylon hoses are rated for 250-ish and above PSI, which is quite a bit. So you do want to make sure that there's a solid connection here. This is path number one. And the very obvious option number two is just buy some fuel hose and do it yourself. So it makes putting the fitting and securing it into the hose here super easy, so you don't have to worry about that. But also you can route this anywhere you want. If there was maybe a different path that was a little bit more suitable, it gives you some more space. Totally fine. The only catch here is just get something of proper quality. There's always going to be a cheap option for you there that can probably hold like 50 PSI or less. That is basically for like carbureted vehicles and even like lawnmowers and stuff like that, where the demands on the fuel system just aren't that high. You need something that can hold like 100 PSI plus. It's usually a little bit thicker. There's an extra ply in there, and it can hold much more pressure, which is great because we have fuel injected cars that typically have high pressure fuel pumps in them, or in my case here in a project where I'm upgrading my fuel filter to hold more pressure in the entire system. If you end up going down the flexible hose route that I'm doing, obviously you'll have to find a way to secure your fitting to the hose. Two options more or less. First one is the obvious one, good old-fashioned worm clamp. I won't explain it very much. Reusable, which is great. It doesn't look amazing though, and you know, it's secure, but it can loosen over time. If you want to do a little bit more of a fancy professional, maybe even OE version, you can use the ear clamps. They start out looking like this when you slide it over the hose, and then of course you'll have to crimp it down. That very top part there is what needs to be crimped with a set of pliers or a tool much like this to do the final crimping. And I've been using this with quite a bit of success for a couple of years now. It's just a little kit from Amazon. If you want the same one and a set of pliers, I will put the Amazon links into the description of the video. As I said earlier, my solutions are going to work for me, but it's really important that if you find something that was a little different on your car and you found a different solution, share it in the comments. It's important that we use these videos to build the community knowledge around some of the problems at hand and what their solutions might be, so please do share. Well, my friends, now hopefully you have the confidence and the know-how to solve your problem, whether you just want to lower the tank and get those lines out, replace a fitting, rebuild an entire line, or take the easy way out, just buy the OE part and replace it all together. That's totally fine. You have a path forward. And as usual, thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. If you found something in here useful, please consider liking the video, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks.